Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2014 ACURA MDX. In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace the rear wheel bearing. The rear wheel bearings on this vehicle are worn out. They are making a growling noise when the vehicle is being driven down the road. And that noise is increasing when the vehicle's speed increases. So I did the testing. I determined that the rear wheel bearings are worn out. We're going to have to replace the rear wheel bearings so that the noise that's coming from the back of this vehicle when the vehicle is being driven can be fixed. So now let's remove the tire so that we can get the rear wheel bearing replaced. I am going to replace both rear wheel bearings. I'm going to show you how to replace the bearing on the driver's side. I'm going to replace the one on the passenger side off camera. It's the same process. They are both the same. So now let's remove the tire. Now these wheel nuts are 19mm nuts. All right, we got the tire removed. So now I'm going to bring you to the back of the hub so that we can remove the caliper bracket bolt. I'm not going to disconnect the caliper from the bracket. I'm going to leave the caliper on its bracket. We're just going to undo the caliper bracket bolt, and then we're going to remove the whole bracket with the caliper. We're going to sit it up here, and then we're going to remove the bolt for the wheel bearing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to retract the caliper piston. So we're going to use this small screwdriver / pry bar. We're going to stick it in this inspection hole, and then we're going to pry our caliper towards me gently. Okay, as you can see, our caliper is floating. And then we're going to undo the caliper bracket bolt. So there's this bolt over here, this one, and then this one up here. And the caliper bracket bolts are 17mm bolts. So once we undo these two bolts, the caliper is going to come out with the bracket. So here comes the second caliper bracket bolt. So now we're gonna lift our caliper and its bracket. We're just gonna lay it up here. We have to make sure that the caliper is not hanging on its hose. Okay, so that's good. So while we are back here, I'm gonna undo the wheel bearing bolt. So we have 4 bolts over here. So I don't know if you can see them. There's one over here, and then there's another one up here, and then there are 2 more on this side. So I'm going to undo these 2, and then I'm going to show you the other ones back here. And the wheel bearing bolts are 17mm bolts. All right, so we got the first 2 bearing bolts undone. These 4 bolts that you see over here are the bolts that hold the bearing on the knuckle. So we already undid these 2. Now we're gonna undo these 2 over here. And once again, these are 17mm bolts. And then we're gonna undo this one up here. So now let's use our electric ratchet to remove these bolts. So here comes the first bearing bolt. And all these bolts are the same length, so they're all the same. It doesn't matter which one goes where. So all these bolts have the same length, so it doesn't matter which one goes where. Here comes the second one. So now we're gonna remove the last one. So here comes the last one. We're good. So now let's come up front here so we can remove the rotor and the axle nut. We're gonna remove our brake rotor. I'm gonna remove this little screw that holds the brake rotor on the flange. It's a little Phillips screw. Then we're gonna use a hammer and tap this. And then our brake rotor should be able to come out. Just like that. Okay. So here's the brake rotor. It doesn't look too bad. So now we're gonna remove the axle nut. Now this axle nut is pinched over here for the locking mechanism, or to have it locked on the axle. So we're gonna push this back just a little bit, and then we're gonna undo this. The axle nut size is a 36mm. So just like that, the axle nut is removed. Actually, as you can see, our bearing is ready to come out. Okay, so the bearing is loose, so now we can slide it out just like that. I don't know if you can hear, this bearing is making noise. Listen. You hear that? I hope this microphone can pick this up. Yeah, so this is the noise that the customer was complaining about. I hope you can hear that. This bearing is making noise. So this bearing is bad. Okay, we're gonna replace it. I got OEM wheel bearings. We're gonna replace both of them. All right, so this is bad. Let's get this out of the way. Now that we got the wheel bearing removed, we're gonna clean the bearing seat. There is a wheel speed sensor over here, so we have to be careful not to damage that sensor. Okay, so the bearing seat is pretty clean. It wasn't dirty. And then we're gonna clean this up with some brake clean. I have a drain container underneath over here, So all the brake clean that I'm spraying is falling into the drain container. Now, while we are here, we're gonna inspect the park brake shoes and the park brake mechanism and the springs for the park brake shoes. So the park brake shoes hardware looks good. The parking brake shoes themselves look good also. They are not worn out, so this is good. This car is in pretty good condition. It only has 114,000 miles. Okay, so that's good. Now I'm gonna lube up the bearing seat, and after that we're gonna install our brand new wheel bearing. We're gonna apply a little bit of anti-seize compound right here, just a tiny bit, and then we're gonna apply a little bit on the axle splines. Okay. I did get OEM wheel bearings. Here is our wheel bearing, and this is the part number. So we got an OEM bearing. So let me get this out of the box. So here's our brand new OEM wheel bearing from the Honda or Hyundai or ACURA. I mean, from the Honda dealership. You know, ACURA, Honda, same thing. Okay, so here's our brand new bearing. So now we're gonna install it just like that. We're gonna make sure that the splines on the axle are lined up with the splines on the wheel bearing. Okay, so just like that. So now let's go to the back of the wheel bearing so we can install the wheel bearing bolts. So now let's install the wheel bearing bolts. We got the first one installed and started. So we're gonna get all these bolts started all the way. We're gonna get them snug, and then we're gonna torque them down. Now I did apply a little bit of anti-seize compound on the threads of the wheel bearing bolts. All right, so we got all the bearing bolts started. So now we're gonna get them snug. All right, so we got all the bearing bolts snug. So now we're gonna torque them down. The torque spec for the wheel bearing bolt is 72 foot-pounds. So I got my torque wrench over here. So I'm gonna set it up to 72 foot-pounds. Okay, so let's start with the bolt down here first. So right there, I hope you can hear the torque wrench click. So this is torqued to 72 foot-pound. That's good. So now we're going to torque this one over here. So I'm going to crisscross this bolt. So we torqued this one. Now we're going to torque this one over here. So just like that, the second one is torqued. So now we're going to torque the third one up here. Good. All right, so this is torqued to 72 foot-pound. So now we're going to torque the last one. So just like that. I hope you can hear the torque wrench click. Nice. So this is torqued to 72 foot-pound. That's good. Let's try this one again. It's torqued. Now I'm just double checking all of them to make sure that they're all torqued. All right. So all our bearing bolts are torqued down to 72 foot-pound. So now let's come up front so we can install our brake rotor. I'm gonna apply a little bit of anti-seize compound right here on the hub flange. And then we're gonna install our brake rotor just like that. We're gonna install the screw that holds the rotor on the hub flange. We're going to install the axle nut. Now we're going to torque the axle nut. The torque spec for the axle nut is 181 foot-pound. So right there, I hope you can hear the torque wrench click. All right, so we torqued the axle nut to 181 foot-pound, so that's good. So now we're gonna bring down our brake caliper and caliper bracket. So just like that. Our caliper bracket and caliper is installed. So now we're gonna install the bolts for the caliper bracket. I got the first one started. Now we're gonna install the second one. I did put a little bit of anti-seize compound on the threads of the caliper bracket bolt. Now we're going to torque the bolt for the caliper bracket. The torque spec for the caliper bracket bolt is 65 foot-pound. So now we're going to torque this bolt right there. I hope you heard the torque wrench click. So that's torqued to 65 foot-pound. So now we're going to torque this one just like that. Okay, torqued up to 65 foot-pound. All right, so we're good to go. Now, we did not touch the caliper bolts, but while I'm here, I'm just gonna check them. We didn't undo these bolts, but you never know. Okay, so these bolts are tight. All right, So that's good. I'm gonna spin the disc. All right, everything looks good. Everything feels good. So now let's install the tire. Before we install the tire, we're gonna pinch our axle nut. We're gonna pinch this little locking mechanism here. Okay, so right here. All right, so here comes the tire. So we're gonna get this nut snug, and then we're gonna torque them down. Now we're gonna torque the lug nuts. The torque spec for the lug nuts is 85 foot-pound. So that's torqued. We're gonna crisscross them. That's torqued. All right, so that's torqued to 85 foot-pound. This one also. This one also. All right, we're good. All right, guys, that's it. I'm gonna leave this right over here. This is how you remove and replace a rear wheel bearing on this 2014 ACURA MDX. I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.